Scout is hard. Scout being both the squishiest little guy and one of the scariest mercs to fight in a 1v1 is not a coincidence. His whole shtick when going head to head is dodging the enemy's shots and then smacking him right back even harder with his scatter gun. But even with how many hours I have in TF2, I still kinda really suck at Scout. I always feel so bad switching to Scout because it feels like I'm underperforming and letting my team down. And as a demo main, Scouts are undoubtedly going to be the hardest players for me to fight against. Like, stand still, why the heck is every Scout moving like that? How the hell are you living through a fight with only 125 health? But before we go any further, this is not a guide on how to get better. I know for a fact I will never be the Scout who shuts down a server with a pocket medic and a loadout worth more than the rest of the server's entire backpacks combined. This is just my journey to becoming a better Scout player who won't get instantly shut down by a guy like that. I want to be able to play around on Scout before Splashy McFeetsniff adds another notch to their rocket launcher. I want to actually contribute to the team while playing Scout. Starting off at square one, I really wanted to start figuring out my loadout.
Oh man.
I started using Scout's stock loadout, because I regularly see Scouts running the same default loadout all the time who outperform me, with some cash behind each variant. Come on, I haven't been free to play in years. I was chalking it up to most of them having over 10,000 hours on Jeremy, and having double that as the New Zealander. Yeah, I'm not saying that mercs roll because I don't want to get demonetized for one word, but there's a secret I don't want to admit too often. I used to also play a lot of that New Zealander alongside demo, so when I was aiming with my scattergun up close, it was often while trying to catch my crosshair up to my enemies. And Team Fortress 2 has some quirky movement when it comes to FPS games, so it's a Sisyphean task to only flick for every target. I had to reinforce it into my absolutely tiny head that I can aim with my movement as well. I'm not saying for every single kill, all I had to do was take my hand off the mouse and let my opponents walk into my crosshairs, but it did help against some opponents so I could flick less often. And there's tons more of stuff I had learned while I tried to get good, like staying away from taking damage to edge out a fight, picking my fights and juking people into thinking I'm not having this fight, picking what part of the map I'm going to push into or just avoid completely. Stickies all over the choke. How am I supposed to play like Scout here, man? Like, someone explain that to me. It seems pretty simple, but figuring out that Scout isn't just for rushing in and bashing my head into a wall of enemies or a sentry made playing him that much easier. My explosive wielding demo brain was so used to breaking apart the engineer's nest with my grenades that when I was playing Scout, I was somehow trying to do the same. When possible though, all I really had to do was flank around while I was blocking my path. But being able to take less damage isn't going to win a fight for me alone. I need to also be dishing it out. After figuring out how to move and aim as Scout, I could finally get back to choosing what loadout was going to work for me. Starting off with the scatterguns, I personally enjoyed using the Force of Nature. Being able to quickly knock someone into the air before finishing them off with a second shot makes me feel like I'm wielding the super shotty. But with that high damage comes knockback, basically just tickling my opponent when they're flying out of my range. The Soda Popper completely rectifies that problem in every way, by throwing out damage just as fast as the Force of Nature, but without the knockback. I swear, giving Scout extra jumps when you fill up the meter is akin to flight. And every Scout main who was old enough to read that original chapter of DBZ swears by the shortstop. Like, yeah, I get how it's powerful, but even after dedicating an entire week to using this thing, I cannot for the life of me figure out why it's loved. It shoots faster like the previously mentioned side grades, but I can't find any satisfaction in losing the Scout matchup because I only have 4 shots. But the most problematic scattergun I kept trying to use has to be the back scatter. I swear if one person says it works best in Scout, I'm going to equip the lock and load. That thing is like taking the shortstop and making it worse. The 4 shots feel terrible in any prolonged matchup. It can barely land a pellet in the mid-range. The weapon tunnels you into just playing as a backline eliminator, which is effective, but the stock scattergun can do the same. So in the end, I came running back to the GOAT. But the scattergun isn't the only thing I'm using to get kills with here. Scout's secondaries are actually some of the most fun you can have in all of TF2. The old reliable is great when I'm trying to pick someone off running away, but that's only if the random spread ever works in your favor, so I tossed it. Bonk is low-key powerful, letting me distract sentries for the team to swoop in and break on offense, or flanking behind to break the enemy tellies while I'm defending. But I honestly can't bring myself to keep it as my go-to recommendation for Scout, so I tried the Criticola. No I didn't, I'm lying, the Criticola sucks, get out of here. Then I had a fun go at the pistol side grades. The Pretty Boy's pocket pistol is honestly a getaway tool for ripping into someone fast and for a few points of health, but ultimately it still has a random spray pattern I don't enjoy dealing with. The Winger, on the other hand, is also just fun to use. The extra damage really isn't too useful because most of the time I kept using this to outmaneuver the enemy and then get places faster. But like I will continue to hammer home, I'm a projectile lover. Scout has 2 projectile secondaries, so let's just take a quick glance at them. The Mad Milk is honestly a contender for the best utility item in the entire game. This suspicious liquid lets you cover your enemies and then heal from hurting them. And I am all here for healing items. Not you. Get the f out. And when you can sling this chilled cream a couple times a minute, I am ready to coat people and push the fight in my favor. Then there's Scout's other projectile based weapon. Forgive me for sounding like a salesman in the overnight ads, but this bad boy does so much for me. The flying guillotine makes my projectile wired brain go wild with dopamine, especially when you get funny ragdolls from it. One hit on a medic can usually scare them into running away from their heal target, or even forcing an Uber if you're doing well enough in that match. Now that I got 2 of my 3 slots ready, what could possibly fill the usually useless melee slot? The stock bat is terrible, and using a fish is only good for the funny, so I'm tossing them. The Boston Bastard is what I should be using, with how hard you make people hurt with it, but more often than not, I hit myself with it and end up feeding the enemy. So my only other viable option as I see it is, yeah, it's the Rap Assassin. You know the deal. Projectile makes my brain go ooga booga. Scout having another mid to long range projectile is great, and the bleed stacks with the guillotine for bonus damage over time. This loadout may not give me the most epic playstyle possible for Scout, but when combined with Scout's ability to dodge a lot of damage, it's really fun. So after figuring out what loadout I was going to use for my personal playstyle, I had to practice my mechanics. Much like each merc of TF2, Scout is built different. For 1, he runs faster than everyone else, and 2, he can double jump. Don't ask me how he does it, it doesn't matter, science nerds. Getting good at Scout meant relearning how WASD and strafing could keep me alive during a match. It's important with every merc to learn how you move, but it's paramount with Scout because a mistimed jump leads to a face full of rockets. And having that hammered into my very tiny head after every death taught me what not to do against a future opponent. For example, learning the range it's best to stay out of a pyro's wacky wonky flame particles. Living after a fight saves you a trip to the respawn room, but avoiding any damage saves you a hangout at the engineer's dispenser. Speaking of dispensers, they're my best friend for healing up when someone else has stolen my large health kit. Notice I said the dispenser though, and not the engineer. Engineer and his sentry are my biggest enemy in Scout. You can dodge a person's shot, but you can't dodge a literal machine's aim. It's frustrating to run into an area and getting immediately reminded who really controls that space. I wish I could say Scout is needed for every map and every team, but this is casual Uncletopia. Experienced players will eat a bad Scout as an appetizer. The matches aren't as organized as competitive matches, so not everyone groups up or syncs their pushes together to take an objective. When the game devolves into smashing your face into a brick wall that is the red defense, I'm better off just switching to another merc. Like on some payload maps, blue is constantly railroading into the red team's explosive riddle jaws, munching away at anyone foolish enough to push that choke. And as a Scout, I can barely live through just peeking one doorway or corridor. So on most control point and Koth maps, Scout has more freedom to just move around if everyone is focused on that central objective. Here's some Rornir, but I literally only used to play 32 player Dust Bowl before I made this channel, so I never needed to learn Scout. He's basically useless there. But since unshackling myself from the chains of Dust Bowl, I've kept wanting to get better at playing this little dude. As I kept playing more Scout, I was finding out some of the most effective ways to play him sort of felt like demo night. That's not a joke. A good Scout wants to get right up in an enemy's face before chunking down an enemy in a couple of hard hits, just like a sword-wielding demo. Demo nights usually have to stay back from a fight, watching and waiting for an opening. If I'm playing either of them, I want to use my faster movement to both run in to deal huge damage as quick as possible, and then using that same supersonic speed to escape with my life. Both of them require you to master your movement to just outplay your opponent much more than some of the other mercs. Jumping, strafing, and damage surfing are so important to Demo Knight and Scout. Getting better at something as mundane as movement can lead to you being a better player, and that's what I really love about Team Fortress 2. In my eyes, they are almost the exact same, except that Scout can fight back against the Pyro. And after a month and a half of playing mostly Scout, I can say I'm better off now than at the start of making this video. I don't think I'll ever dominate one of those super scouts who have a pocket medic, but now I know I have a decent chance of adding a notch to my strange scattergun instead of ending up on theirs. I'm going to say thanks for waiting so long for this video. I spent all of January, and now parts of February, getting my animations and mocap to not look like this jank. Hopefully the wait time between these types of videos can be much shorter as I get better with this. But if you like this video I made for your eyeballs, thanks a ton. I'm gonna go start working on another video, so peace out.
This game sucks. I'm gonna go goon.
So fucking real!